welcome to Tabletop Tommies episode 9. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Phil.
And I'm Mike.
So today we're joined by Mike, TO of Beachhead, which is one of the biggest tournaments that I've been to. I'd imagine it's probably the biggest tournament in the south of England. Also a WTC player. But, Mike, is it the biggest tournament in England?
This year we had 36 participants. So as far as I'm aware, we're probably in the top 3.
Yeah. South of Nottingham, you're definitely in the top 5.
We're the biggest one in our postcode.
Certainly. Definitely one of the top 10 in the county. Yeah, so what is Beachhead for anyone who's listening but hasn't ever been or heard of Beachhead?
So Beachhead itself is a tabletop game show run by Entoyment. They put on loads of traders, people come down, they sell their wares, but they also have a tournament hall. I run the bolt action tournament, and I've done that for the last 2 years now because I joined in after COVID. But it's been going for about 8 years now, I think. It's been going for a fair while. But yeah, it's a 2-day event down in the south of England in Dorset. And yeah.
So how long had you been playing bolt action before you took over Beachhead?
I had been playing about 6 months before I was asked to take over Beachhead.
Jumping in the deep end then.
Yes, I tend to grab things with 2 hands when I get involved.
Nice. What got you started in bolt action? Did you come from another game system?
No, I hadn't played any tabletop games, and I wasn't really into board games either. It was during COVID. I bought a Cromwell tank. I built it up and I painted it, and I thought I want to build some infantry with it, make a nice little scene out of it. And then I wanted to actually use them, so I took them down the shop, and the rest is history, as they say.
Indeed, that's very much like Phil's story, isn't it? Because Phil, you weren't a gamer either beforehand, were you?
No, not really. I similar to Mike, I started in lockdown. After Mike did, I bought some commandos and Germans and painted them up, and then decided that I also wanted to use them in a game environment, and found a local club and went from there.
Cool. I tell you what, I've never asked both of you actually, because I believe, Mike, we met at Beachhead the first year you were running it. But is that where you and Phil met each other?
It is, yes.
Yes, I still remember the emails talking about the Ramblers in Portsmouth.
Yeah, so I played a grand total of 4 games of bolt action in my life prior to Beachhead, 2022. Actually, yeah, it was last February, wasn't it?
Yes.
So I think I played my first game December 21 at my local club in Havant. And then I emailed the shop, so Entoyment in Poole, are the guys that run the Beachhead event. I emailed them because there were no tickets on sale, and I said, "Are you going to release any more?" And they did, and I bought a ticket, and I had 3 more games in between. That point and Beachhead itself. Sent the list into Mike, and I used the Commando PDF list. Because at this point, I didn't really know what campaign books were or anything like that. Mike replied and went, "No, you can't use that. You need to use an official list." And I was like, "Okay, where do I find that?" So bought the D-Day and British and Canadian sector book. Found the late war commando list. I was like, right, what do I got? I've got a Cromwell tank, and I've got a box of commandos, and I've got the commando and HQ support weapon. So I had the mortar and the MMG. Built my 9 dice 1,000-point list, and was like, right, off we go. And then rocked up to Beachhead and played Andy Avery from Wales in my first game with his Japanese, and got absolutely smashed. And then second game didn't finish because of time, and I lost that one. And then played Jason, who plays with Mike at Entoyment, in my third game. So I lost all 3 games on day 1. Drove back to Portsmouth. Not quite about to flip the table and quit, but was like, right, I need to sort this one out. I've got 12 hours to get my head in the right place. Came back on the second day, drew my next game, first game of the second day against Paul Wickens, and then beat Ian Jones from the Welsh Open in the second game on the second day. So went from, not really knowing what I was doing to still really not knowing what I was doing, but with a draw and a win under my belt by the end of it.
I tell you what, you faced off with some of the big names there, like the
Yeah.
WTC, etc. But I bet they saw you coming with your 9 dice commando list.
I mean, I haven't spoken to Andy about it since then, but I would imagine Andy Avery would have just gone, "What is this?" And to
So,
be fair, my opponents were gentle and lovely, and gracefully beat me. And then the second day, yeah, I got my game head on and yeah, kind of worked out what I was doing. Yeah.
so Mike, before Phil's first beachhead, who had played more games, Phil or you?
Ooh. See, the thing is, I ran a tournament before I ever went to a tournament.
Okay.
Okay.
Basically, I had played a couple of games at the club, and Pete, who's the owner of Entoyment, said, "Oh, did you fancy sort of kickstarting the bolt action scene again?" Because there was a scene, but it's kind of lying dormant, and no one really wanted to get involved on a tournament running level.
Hmm.
So I was like, "Yeah, sure." Yeah. It's just like playing 3 games in one day instead of one. So I did my first tournament at Entoyment, and that went well. And it was after that I got involved with Beachhead. So between then and starting, I must have played 10 games, maybe.
So you really did jump in with both feet.
Yes.
Crazy. Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to ask you about, because I know you do run the smaller tournaments as well as the big one at Beachhead at the show. How many tournaments a year do you reckon you run usually since you started?
Since I started, I try to do one every 2 months if I can.
Hmm.
It might be a little longer after that, but because of how well Employment looks after me, they provide all the terrain, they sell all my tickets. I just got to turn up and smile. It's no skin off my nose, so I could run into a tournament every month if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I try to go for once every 2 months, 10 weeks.
Yeah, I think any more often than that, you're probably oversaturating your local market.
It would just be me and Jason playing, I think.
Yeah. Just a nice little game to stay between the two of you. Brilliant. When you first started, you jumped straight in the tournaments without much experience, but you are quite an experienced player now because I have to say you are an international superstar of the bolt action scene now, aren't you? Haven't played at the WTC?
Um, I definitely been on a plane with models. I don't know about international superstar, but oh yeah, it's good. It's good times. It's good crack.
Yeah. And how did you do at the
Oof.
last WTC? Did you do well, middling, or awful, and you're never going back?
I think I did about as middling can.
Okay.
2 wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss. So I'm on the 51% good, 49% bad kind of. That's where I'm teetering,
Okay.
Yeah, the gentleman's result to end up somewhere in the middle of the table, isn't it?
of course.
How was WTC? Was it a lot of fun though?
I loved it. I It was fantastic. It was my first one, so I had
Hmm.
no previous experience. It's my first international tournament as well. So from just traveling with models, it's these weird little things you kind of don't think about, taking your army on a plane and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, I couldn't fault it. The traveling was good. The England team, so at the time the captains was Topher and Pete from the Juggernauts. Alex as well helped with getting transportation to and from the airports. Everything went smooth. The tournament itself went smooth. I had no issues. I couldn't fault it. Food was nice.
That's really good to hear, to be fair, because there's always, when WTC happens, there's always a bit of stick, isn't there, online? Like, oh, the tables are a bit shabby, or I don't know, like, oh, I can't believe they made that ruling. But to hear from a player who actually went for the first year and loved it clearly shows that actually what you see remotely isn't often fully representative, is it?
You start chatting to the organizers and all that. The amount of effort that they put in to get it to the standard that it is, it's not even in the same league as the efforts local TOs put in.
Hmm.
It's, yeah, just getting 70 odd, because they do the Middle Earth tournaments
Yes.
as well. Just
Yeah.
getting the terrain and then liaising with the local clubs, the local scenes. I got to take my hat. I could do it. So props to them.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think I believe it started as a Middle Earth international tournament, and then they sort of bolted the bolt action on. And I think in the early years that was very apparent from what I've heard from some of the other players, that sort of it didn't feel as well organized as the Middle Earth side. But to hear that it's on the up really is quite a positive thing. Well, before we get into the meat of the Soviet army, which is what we're talking about today, I realised I didn't say that up until this point. The whole point of getting Mike on is he is a big Soviet player, and so Phil and I don't really play Soviets, so we thought it was a perfect opportunity to get him on, talk about Beachhead, talk about WTC, but most importantly, talk about the units you'd find in the Soviet army list, both the competitive ones, the kind of stuff you might see at the WTC, to the really fun ones, the stuff that you'd want to take to stuff like your Welsh Open, your English Open, those kind of tournaments. Did you run the Soviets at WTC, Mike?
I did run the Soviets WTC.
Brilliant. So actually, perfect. You'll be able to. I imagine there'll be a few units in here. You'll be able to tell us exactly how well they did at WTC and whether you're going to bring them next time. So, shall we start with the HQ section, Mike?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So, what have you chosen in your HQ section? I presume inexperienced second lieutenant.
That is my go-to. Yes.
Yeah.
I do love the inexperienced second lieutenant. It is the same inexperienced second lieutenant that all the Allied armies get and some of the Axis armies get. There's nothing special about him. He's just plucky. But the Soviets do have a couple of unique HQ options.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a series of commissars. So you've got the Commissar, Politric Commissar, and Frontnik Commissar. So the bog standard Commissar, he has the not one step back rule.
Yep.
Which means when a unit fails an order check, you can remove one model and they can retry the test with the second result standing. The other two commissars are found in the Stalingrad book,
Mm-hmm.
and so the previous one was 15 points. The next ones are 30 points and 40 points respectively.
Mm-hmm.
The 40-point one, it has the same not one step back rule, but it also has a rule, inspiring rhetoric, which allows inexperienced units not to suffer the -1 while shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I've faced that. It's gives them that little boost in the shooting, which is very nice.
It's something different. It's personally, I'm not massive on it, but it is something different. That one is the Frontnik Commissar, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a fair chunk of points, isn't he? He's the 40-point one, isn't he?
He is the 40-pointer, but
Yes.
he's regular as opposed to the inexperienced, which the previous commissar is.
Yeah, so you could get, 10 unarmed men for the same price?
Yeah, yeah, I'm the best.
Spoiler alert.
And then the other commissar you're talking about, what does he do that's special? Is that the political one? The
That is the
Politruk?
Politruk Commissar. He simply just has inspiring rhetoric. So he doesn't shoot his own men, he inspires them. For 30 points, he does the same thing. Inexperienced squads within 6 inches do not suffer the -1 to hit penalty, which is quite nice. I tend not to worry about shooting when I've run my inexperienced chaff. Sometimes I don't give them guns, so it's one of them. But I've seen people use it to good effect. I can't knock it. There is one more HQ unit which is unique to the Russians, but it doesn't really get seen ever.
Yeah.
They get messengers. They can take a messenger, which is a unique upgrade, and it's got relay orders. So if an officer is accompanied by a messenger and the unit is ordered to fire, the unit may use the relay orders instead of firing their weapon. If it does so, the range of the officer's morale bonus and U-Men snap to action abilities doubles for the rest of the turn. So if you're an LT, it goes to 12. If you're a major, it goes to 24 and so forth.
Okay. I don't think I've ever seen that, to be fair.
It's from the Stalingrad book. There's a couple of other little things. He's a one-shot, one-use messenger, and he can be ambushed if you use him. You can shoot him if you want.
Yeah, as he runs relaying the message back and forth.
Yes.
No pigeons in the Soviet list.
No, they've got human pigeons.
Brilliant. So, a couple of questions I have about the commissar before we move on. Now, the first one was, can I use my medic to save the man the commissar's just shot?
The not one step back rule, it states you remove one model from the unit. It doesn't necessarily count as a casualty. It doesn't infer morale or take a pin or other casualty affected rulings. You simply just remove the model.
I think I've had this conversation probably with one of you two before, because that rings a bell.
Yeah. It's the kind of shenanigans I get up to, isn't it? Either way.
Yeah.
So the medic rule says if a friendly infantry or artillery unit has a medic within 6, suffers a damage from small arms fire, 1 die is rolled per damage. On a 6, that casualty is ignored. Because it says from small arms fire, in the game, the commissar isn't doing small arms fire, is he? He's just removing the man.
Yeah.
Yes, there's no pins or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose you'd say you probably can't medic him. I mean, thematically, you probably shouldn't, because surely the medic would get it next.
The medic would get it next, yeah.
Yeah. But also, just rules-wise, it does look like to me, without spending too long reading the specific wording, it does feel like you probably can't, looking at that. What I did realise was we actually didn't talk about the national characteristics. So do you want to talk us through them, Mike?
They have, I would argue, the best national characteristics in the game.
That's a bold claim.
It is a bold claim. So they've got 4 of them. I think all the major 5 have 4 characteristics. So I'll start from the lesser used and I'll go into the meat and potatoes at the end. So the one you see the least is the mass batteries special rule. It's when you've got an artillery observer. When rolling to determine the fire for effect radius from the aiming point, instead of rolling 1 die for your D6 plus 6, you just roll 2 and then you take the largest. So it's all right. There's a few theatre selectors that let you take either 2 artillery observers or 1 artillery observer that can shoot twice, a bit like the Americans. It's all right for a bit of fluff, but I never really use it unless I'm playing a theatre game, unless I'm doing a campaign mission. So
I can see that.
It's all right, you know. You got the not one step back rule. So this is your commissar. This class as a national characteristic. It's also attached to some infantry squads. I believe it's a Smersh squad takes the not one step back characteristic as well. They basically act like infantry commissars. Then you got the 2 big ones. So on the face of it, everyone thinks the quantity has a quality of its own is the best Russian national characteristics. You get the free 12-man inexperienced squad. They're green, and any upgrades they're allowed to have, they can take for free. This includes a flag or theatre selector augmentations like Fanatic from the Street Fighting Academy, Stalingrad Select.
So that sounds pretty good.
It is good. It's a shiny sort of special rule, but the best special rule, hands down, I think, in the game, is the Great Patriotic War. I love this rule, and it has saved me so many times. Basically, whenever a unit of infantry or artillery models fails a morale check that would otherwise destroy them, you may re-roll it. So when you've got your big squad, it's just been torched by a flamethrower, they put on 2 or 3 pins, you fail it, no you don't, do it again, you pass, life is still good. That, if I had to have only 1 characteristic, that's the one I'd keep for my Soviets. Yeah,
I've felt that on the other end where I've flamed something that I was expecting to die and then they passed their test on a 4. Phil, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so that last one, the reroll and the failed morale checks, we mentioned this actually in an early episode for the Free French in the Western Desert, because they also get this national characteristic. And I find it very frustrating when I'm playing Soviets, either playing Mike or a guy down the club who I play often who normally plays Soviets, and you're like, fantastic, I've just flamed them, they're out of here. They fail the first roll and they pass the second one. I'm like, nope, they're still hanging around. It's very, very frustrating. The other one I was going to mention, Mike, was the commissar, because you said you don't take the commissar, mainly because you don't often take inexperienced armed units. You might look for the unarmed option, won't you? But I've definitely seen people play with the commissar that allows you to remove that -1 to hit for inexperienced squads. I've seen that played very effectively, where you've maybe got 2 or 3, inexperienced rifle squads. That commissar sat behind them within range. Adding that bonus suddenly makes that free squad become even better if they're hitting without that -1 penalty.
He's a very tasty sniper target, though, isn't he?
There is that, yeah.
Yeah. So, in summary, you've got a way to re-roll your morale checks. You can then throw a commissar in and re-roll your order tests. Have you found that the commissar ever hurts you where it kills a model you really didn't want it to kill?
So there is restrictions on who he can kill.
Mm-hmm.
This rule does not apply. So this is the not one step back rule.
Mm-hmm.
This rule does not apply to units other than infantry, and does not apply to infantry units already reduced to 1 or 2 models, or consisting only of 1 or 2 models to begin with. So you can't like shoot the loader of your flamethrower team or anything.
Yeah.
I personally use my infantry for capping objectives, so I tend not to take the commissar purely because I prefer the bodies in one piece rather than them shooting for a turn. I tend to use my tanks, my artillery, and my team weapons to actually kill things. So, I tend not to use them, to be honest.
Oh, interesting. I mean, he's a very cheap order dice.
If you got 15 points spare and you haven't bought 1,000,000 mules, then by all means, yes.
Nothing wrong with that.
Can he take a buddy as well so that he's less vulnerable to prep bombardment?
I believe he can. Yes, up to 2 further men.
Oh, perfect.
He's a bit like an officer. He's armed. He's depicted as armed. So it could be pistol, SMG, rifle.
Oh, that's very cool then, because you could have him as a little SMG squad, couldn't you?
Mm.
Brilliant. So we'd looked at headquarters. Was there anything else in headquarters before we moved on to the meat and potatoes of the list, the infantry?
No, they get a regular medic. Not all armies have that luxury, but that's about it. That's about it for me, I think.
So moving on to the infantry then, what would you say is your favourite infantry, either competitively or thematically?
My favourite infantry I've been using recently is just the 12-man rifle squad. 84 points, green, 12 rifles. Can't go wrong with it. Because of their Great Patriotic War special rule, they do stick around much longer than you actually expect them to. Sometimes you simply just have to shoot them off the table. But yeah, they are the meat and potatoes of most Russian armies, I think. Solid little unit.
So they're both your competitive and your thematic choice, you'd say?
Yes, I don't leave home without.
Several. Not just one, but several, yeah.
Anything else of note in the infantry section for the Soviets?
The thing with the Soviets is with their infantry and their vehicles, they are the most Subway sandwich of armies. So you decide, well, I want a regular infantry, so you got your regular infantry. Then you can have between 5 and 12. That's fantastic. Have as many as you want. They come with all the upgrades, all the special weapons, all the little they're just a pick a mix of armies. Anything in any combination, the Soviets can do it.
Nice.
One unit I do want to point out is the assault engineers. They're veterans, a bit like everyone else's, but they get body armor. It's a bit unique. I don't think any other faction gets body armor, and it just means that small arms they die on a 6, and then on HE they suffer a -1 because of the protective body armor. It's just a cool little rule, really.
And it also applies in close combat, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I've made that mistake before, where I've charged in with a bunch of Gurkhas, forgetting that they had body armor, the Soviet engineers, and then slowly picked off my Gurkhas and put them off the table when they got deleted. Yeah.
So is this a unit you avoid, Phil?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you often see them taken in a Bren carrier, so the engineers with the body armor and a flamethrower in a Bren. And that's partly because with the body armor, they're reduced to 6 inches, aren't they? They can't run.
Yes.
So you're not going to foot slog them up in body armor. Can you take them as tank riders, as engineers with body armor? Or have I made that up?
You can take tank riders with body armor. but they come as with SMGs.
Okay.
Their only upgrade is an LMG or body armor, but no flamethrowers.
Okay, but you could still effectively, put a bunch of vets in body armor with SMGs, drop them on the back of a tank, and push them forward. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. SMG squads, Mike. Do you ever take them?
Not as they come. I believe I share Johnny's sentiment from a previous episode where I like to have a few cheap casualties.
Yeah.
So if I put SMGs and say an 8-man squad, it'll probably be like a 5-3 split.
Okay.
And because the Russians have access to Panzerfausts, you just give the riflemen Panzerfausts.
Got it. Yeah.
They have got an interesting little unit, which is the mounted reconnaissance unit from the Fortress Budapest book, which fantastic little unit. It allows them basically to have regular engineers, so it's a way to get a flamethrower in your army.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And they're allowed to leave up to 2 men behind in whichever vehicle they've been transported in to man the guns. So the most common one you see, there's a 5-man squad in a Bren carrier. They leave a chap behind to do the pintle mount of the on the Bren carrier, and it'll be 4 regular dudes with flamethrower, maybe an SMG. It's unique. Again, the Russians have so many unique units that other armies just don't have.
Quantity has a quality of its own, no?
Definitely.
On that mounted recon squad, now one of the things that I've seen debated is whether the transport is empty after you've left a man behind, in terms of when it dies at the end of the turn because it's closer to the enemy than it is to a friendly unit. Now, when it first came out, I thought that it meant the transport was occupied. But recently, I'm starting to think that it means the transport is still empty because there isn't a unit inside. How is that played? Or is it basically TO's discretion?
So there's nothing that specifically states how it interacts with the empty transport rule. Whenever I've had it come up as a TO, I've always ruled it on the basis that the dice is attached to the to the rest of the squad. And unlike a spotter who shares a dice with the mortar, you can't then do anything with this lone individual. He has left the squad. He is part of the transport. So by game mechanics, it is still an empty transport. There is no unit occupying said transport.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right way to play it as well, because I think regardless of the game mechanics, which I think you are right on, I think if you said it wasn't empty, that would be incredibly powerful, because you just turned let's say you took 3 Bren carriers, you've just turned them into armoured cars. There's no risk of putting them too close to the enemy then. And so I think that's definitely the right way to play it. Phil, did you have thoughts on that?
That was the question I was going to ask. And I'm just reading actually what it says in Fortress Budapest. So the final sentence for the special rules for that unit. Each squad member left behind to man the transport guns allows one weapon to be fired in addition to the usual one otherwise allowed for an empty transport. So if you get all semantics and actually look at what that sentence means, by saying otherwise allowed for an empty transport, the writer of that rule has basically indicated that transport is considered to be empty. By sticking in that extra man, you're allowing yourself to fire the additional gun, which would otherwise not be allowed were it to be an empty transport. So for me, it means it's still empty, and it should therefore run away if it's left closer to the enemy than your own unit at the end of the turn.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that last bit of the sentence, as an empty transport, it infers there that the transport still counts as empty. You've just added this special rule that it gets to shoot 1 extra or 2 extra guns, depending on how many men you sacrifice to do that. Cool.
Absolutely, yeah. That's how I would interpret that sentence. Yeah.
Is there anything else in the infantry section worth looking at?
I have to give an honourable mention to the Strath Battalion. They are usually a mainstay for my armies. At their absolute cheapest, but whilst also being full strength, you can get them at 27 points. So it's 5 men. It's an infantry squad. Yeah. So at its basic, it's 5 inexperienced men with rifles. You can then add 7 additional unarmed men at 4 points each.
Mm-hmm.
You can give said unarmed men rifles for 3 points each, and you can then make the entire unit shirkers for -3 points each. So you could run them like a rifle squad if you wanted to, if you didn't want the shirker rule in play. But
Mm-hmm.
you tend to take them for the cheap casualties and the cheap dice.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big one in terms of featuring in the FAQ, isn't it? Because both of those rules, the unarmed and the shirkers, have had FAQ rulings that are that haven't made people very happy. It's probably a good way to say that. Probably upset people, to put it more bluntly. What happened to the shirkers in the FAQ, Mike?
So what happened to shirkers in the FAQ was that they count pins as double for everything. So if you've got an inexperienced shirker unit, it only needs 4 pins to break the unit and cause it to rout.
Yeah.
I know before then it was played either way. I mean, I've played it either way when I've been using them at the club. So
I think we played and rolled off, didn't we, when we played before this FAQ rule?
yes. Yeah. Yes. I've found since the FAQ ruling, I maybe lost them once or twice to being pinned out, and that was mainly at a silly event me and Alex did where we had about 152 blokes on the table. So they got a pasting.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been the death of shirkers that I think everyone thought it would be. I still find value in.
Yeah, it is a good tip though, for anyone facing Soviets, to just pile the pins on, and then if you can just get 4 pins, so 4 rifle squads can just put 1 pin each on. Doesn't matter if it's a 12-man squad and you only kill a few, you're still going to get rid of them. So there's a tip from the other side of the aisle.
I encourage that, because if you're using a fire order with your, say like your rifle squads or whatever, using a fire order, the Soviets have a lot of big blast weaponry, squad deleters, and if you're shooting up the 27-point squad and not being able to go down against, they've got a lot of heavy howitzers on, they got a lot of like heavy anti-tank guns with large blasts, and they've got everything. We'll get their vehicles.
Yeah, we'll get to them.
But they're a good distraction squad for that reason.
Absolutely. I mean, the times that I've done it, it's been when someone's used their shirkers to basically try and create a roadblock where you don't really have a choice but to sort of deal with them. And then in that case, you just sort of whittling them down, and then they just disappear once you get a few pins on them. The unarmed rule. Now, I believe unarmed men of other nations get to fight in close quarters, but the Soviet ones don't. Is that correct?
Right. So after my massive blunder with the unarmed rule, which has been covered many times before, so I'm not getting into it, I started looking at all the unarmed units throughout the different books. And so inside the Soviet book, it's the Straf Battalion, and it is the I believe it's the People's Militia Squad that can take unarmed men. And they get the little rule where unarmed men cannot fight in combat, blah, blah, blah. But also the Dutch, they get, I think it's one of those Dutch East Indies units. They can take unarmed shirkers. It's basically the same setup as the Straf Battalion. 5 men with rifles, 7 unarmed, can be shirkers, can get guns. They don't have the rule. The British Home Guards, no, they do have the rule. The British Home Guard don't have the rule. They're unarmed. Oh my God, the German penal battalions, they don't have the rule.
Are you feeling that they've got something against your squad? Is that what you're trying to tell us here?
I feel like they're trying to ruin my fun specifically. But I've got past it. I've got past it.
It does sound like you're over it, to be honest.
Yeah, completely.
No, well, when it first happened, I was like, oh, I wanted to have a look at what all the other unarmed stuff did, because I liked it as a concept, just chucking dead cheap men at things.
Yeah.
My favorite one I come across though was a British unit, and it was the Auxiliary Engineer Corps, something like that. They could all be unarmed, up to like 12 men. I
Yeah.
believe they're generic.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the rule. Yeah, just chuck them that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah, it's like in the last episode we were talking about the Germans paying slightly more for the same truck the British have, basically, with the autocannon. But before we get too negative about the armies needing balanced, let's bring it back to positives. So
Can I jump in, Johnny? And if we're about to move on, I have 3 squads I wanted to ask Mike about in the infantry sections. So the scout squad, Mike.
yep.
So that's the forward deploying unit, much like snipers and forward observers and so on. You take them as veterans. They're armed with rifles. You can upgrade them with SMGs. You can't add Panzerfaust to them though. Is that something you ever take, the Soviet Scout Squad?
Yes, if I do take veterans, it tends to be, and not engineers, it tends to be scouts. Just simply for, they're basically commandos that can forward deploy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can't knock them. You stick them 6 men, all SMGs, all veterans, stick them up on objective, especially in a game like timely objectives, where some packs allow you to forward deploy, some don't. But in missions where forward deploying is fantastic, and it also means for things like your prep bombardment or whatever, you stick them that 0.1 of an inch past the deployment zone, and they're golden.
Yeah, and they're very good, aren't they? So the sniper hunters, because you can forward deploy them. They're armed with SMGs. You can get right in somebody's face very quickly and take out that sniper, very early on in the first turn if you need to.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is another unit I like to do for that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But I see your reason.
So the other 2 I wanted to mention was the Mongolian cavalry.
Yes.
Purely because, and I think I'm right in saying, are they the only cavalry unit that can fire rifles normally from horseback?
I believe so. They got the born in the saddle.
Born in the saddle rule, yeah. So normally for cavalry, if they are firing their rifles from horseback, it's limited to 6 inches as though it was a pistol. Whereas with these guys, they can fire at the normal up to 24. And because they're cavalry, they get the tough fighter rule as well.
Yes.
But they are expensive.
I imagine it does mean, though, that they don't get... Because the cavalry rule says you shoot them as pistols, which to me says that you get the assault rule and you don't get the negative for movement. Whereas these guys are shooting as rifles, so they would get the negative for movement. Is that a correct reading of the rule?
Yeah, I think that is true, yeah.
Yeah. So it's worth it for the extra range, I would say, 100%.
Yeah. And then you can also charge in as cavalry with tough fighters. Yeah.
Classic.
The final one from me, Mike, was the Storm Group.
Oh, I love them. Yes.
Okay.
They are fantastic. They were added in the Stalingrad book, I believe.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
They're a little bit pricey, but they're essentially veterans armed with SMG. So starting off as veteran tough fighters, and when they're doing an assault, initiating an assault, whether they go against, I believe it's either crossing rough ground or against a defended position, they still attack first. They're good for digging out units.
Yeah, it's 2 rules. So whenever this unit initiates close quarters with an enemy unit, the enemy cannot take advantage of the defensive position rule. So you don't get simultaneous combat, which means then that the unit always attacks first in any close quarters fight they initiate.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that's stated as well, isn't it? That second part, it's not... That wasn't just your interpretation. It actually specifically says...
That's specifically stated, yeah.
They always strike first, which is very nice.
Yeah, just to clarify, when I said they ignore the rough, they still get their movement shortened. It's the simultaneous aspect of crossing rough ground.
Yeah, the defensive position bit. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. On to support weapons then.
Right.
So, I think their mortars are all just the usual. Their machine gun teams, they are one of the few armies that get access to a heavy machine gun team, but I imagine we don't need to talk about that because it's too many points. No one's ever going to take one, even thematically. Is that a fair assessment, Mike?
Yeah, it's not something I tend to put in my armies.
Yeah, no, it's just too many points. I think something like 70 points, which is just crazy for 3 shots. Sniper teams. Is there anything specific in the sniper teams you want to talk about?
Well, the Sniper team itself, from the Armies of book, is your bog standard 2 men, one as a sniper, one as nothing else.
Hmm.
As far as sniping goes, they're your bog standard sniper team with no pistols. Um, they do, however, have
Hmm.
two other sniper units that take up the sniper slot.
Hmm.
They have and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, the uh, the Zichai squad, Zichata. That's it, the Zichata squad. I hope I mispronounced that correctly. Basically, that's your enemy at the gates, sort of. Yeah, that's your thematic unit. So they got two rules. It's
Hmm.
master and Zichata. One sniper is master. The other two are the Zichata in training. Uh, the the master sniper should be differentiated in some way and acts as an NCO. So basically, if the master sniper dies,
Hmm.
the squad gets relegated to. And they start at regular, by the way.
Yep.
The squad gets relegated to inexperienced,
Hmm.
and likewise, if both the Z chatter die, the squad gets elevated to veteran.
Oh, cool. So if you're sniping this squad, you want to snipe the master and make them inexperienced. What you don't want to do is snipe one of the juniors.
Well, for the morale point of view, yes. But
Hmm.
I don't think it really affects their shooting. I know there's been on the bolt action page some discussion whether an inexperienced sniper takes the -1 for shooting. Um, I haven't really kept up with it, but I know people talk about it in regards like partisans and stuff like that. But
Oh,
they're not team weapons either. It's like I say, it's got an NCO.
yeah. So it's just three models, is it?
Yes.
That's very interesting. So they they're not affected by not having a loader. They interesting, yeah. I'll have a little look in the FAQ if. Do you want to keep talking about the Z chatter, or is that? I was
On
laughing there because you were very hesitant to say the word and insistent that you'd mispronounce it, and then said it as many times as I've heard anyone ever say it.
um, I found the page in my book whilst I was stumbling, so I hope I've dug myself out of that hole.
Yeah.
But also on your point of shooting the master,
Yep.
they have another rule called team spotting. So
Hmm.
on a fire order, you choose who shoots, either the master or both the Z chatter. So whether it's one shot or two shots. Um, so it if you kill the master, the Z chatter do act as if they have no spotter, but they're still firing off two shots.
Ah, so he's like the assistant to both of the juniors.
Yes.
Right, that's interesting.
So they're quite good at taking out team. They have to target the same enemy unit and declare the models they're targeting before firing is resolved. But if you're engaging in the sniper war and you're firing off two shots to their one with a possibility of three casualties and no team weapon auto delete, you're probably going to win that battle.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
you're paying 120 points for the privilege.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. If you were facing a squad with, say, you were facing the Americans with two BARs in a squad, then that's dead easy for your sniping because you say this sniper is targeting one of them, this sniper's targeting the other one. I imagine it's less worth the points when you're using your sniper to pick off something like a mortar team or the enemy's officer, because then you might get two wounds, but it doesn't really matter because they did the same thing. Although I suppose you've boosted the odds of getting that hit that you were looking for, which is good. Jumping back to the inexperienced thing, I would say that inexperience doesn't affect snipers because the rule for sniper in the big rule book says the shot ignores negative to hit modifiers except for pinning markers and for the missing assistant if the sniper is the last man standing.
Mm.
And so it says you ignore everything except pins and missing assistant. So I'd say inexperience doesn't affect snipers based on that reading.
Yeah, that was the general consensus I think most people came to, which does make it worth killing the master. Because if you shoot the master whilst they have a squad of three, he dies on a four.
Hmm.
But if you kill the two babies, he goes up to veteran. So then he's
Yeah.
harder to kill as well.
Yeah, and also that pin has more value if they're inexperienced because if you keep them regular or veteran, they're more likely to pass their order test to shoot you back.
Mm.
Brilliant. Anything else you want to say about this squad that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce?
Um, no, everything that they can do, the next squad pretty much does better.
Oh, well, go on. Tell me about this next squad. You got me all excited.
So to make the comparison, that is a three-man squad, 120 points, three snipers. They do their business. The Russians also get the sniper detachment, which is 5 men, one NCO. The NCO can have a submachine gun. So at base, they're all riflemen.
Mm-hmm.
Up to 2 men can have a sniper rifle for 30 points. For each sniper included, one man becomes a spotter. So you'll have your NCO, 2 snipers, and 2 spotters, essentially putting out the same amount of sniper shots as the Zychata squad,
Mm-hmm.
but with 2 extra men, and they can have an SMG. So if you're going all in, it's
Mm-hmm.
128 points. So they're
With the
veterans as
SMG,
well.
yeah.
Yeah. So they're veterans to begin with.
Hmm.
They're 8 points more expensive. You've got 2 extra dudes. You're putting out the same amount of sniper firepower. If I was to use one, this is the one I'd use.
Yeah, what I like about that is I often don't bring a sniper because I find it's a bit of a zero-sum game where the only reason I'm taking a sniper is because you're taking a sniper, and so all we're going to do is we're just going to shoot each other snipers until one of the snipers wins, and then the rest of the game the sniper might run on an objective or it might miss a shot, or it's not going to have a huge impact. It was mainly there just to protect my mortar. Whereas this squad, it's going to win that sniper battle, and then hopefully it still has its 2 sniper rifles to keep knocking stuff out. And then if the enemy does get too close, it's got that submachine gun to hopefully either win the combat because it's a veteran or just put out an extra couple of shots. So actually, I really like that squad. It's a bit pricey, but I do like it.
I've used it in thematic and campaign games,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quite nice. So when someone brings up their engineers or that unit they bought the LMG in, they were
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, this sniper's good target the LMG, this sniper's good target the NCO," and as long as you get 1 kill, you're happy.
100%. Did you want to talk more about snipers, or can we talk about your doggies?
We could talk about me doggies.
Right, tell me about your doggies. What are they called?
They are the dog mine anti-tank team.
It's a funny
Um,
name for a dog.
They are Dogs Trust do not approve.
Mm-hmm.
They are absolutely fantastic. I love them. They're
Yep.
absolutely brilliant. So essentially, they're not a team weapon. They're the NCO and a man. Uh, so each handler has a rifle, 80 anti-tank grenades, and a dog mine. Um, any handler may have a submachine gun instead of a rifle for 3 points, and you may add up to 2 additional handlers equipped as above for 13, 18, or 23 points, respectively, for their veterancy. So, as all with the anti-tank units, the Soviet Union, you can have 3 for every 0 to 1 selection. So, in your generic reinforced platoon, you can have 3 of these squads, or you can mix and match. But what makes them special is they have dog mines. So, a
Mm-hmm.
dog mine is a one-shot weapon, a bit like a Panzerfaust. People tend to model them on separate bases, but they're not classed as part of the unit. They are simply a weapon.
Yeah, they sit on your lap if you get in a transport, don't they? They
Yes,
don't get a seat to themselves.
no, they sit in their lap on transport or run alongside it or under it, depending how lucky you are.
Hopefully not.
So it's a one-shot weapon, has a range of 18 inches. But the thing with a dog mine is it can only target stationary vehicles. So any vehicle that isn't sporting a run or advanced order. So if it has a down order, as a fire, if it has moved and gone down, you can target it. If it's decided to recce and it's gone down, you can target it. It's anything not sporting a run or advanced order. So they're fired as normal, except things like pins won't affect how they hit. They roll on a chart. So on a 1, the dog is, he's a bit messed up, and he runs under the closest friendly vehicle within its range. So if you've got your Katusha, parked nicely next to him, you fire off your dogs, you roll a 1, your Katusha's probably going to die. On a 2 or 3, nothing happens. They're assumed to be gunned down or run away. But on a 4, 5, or 6, they hit their target, and the vehicle suffers a hit with a penetration modifier of +5, and no other modifiers apply. So if you're shooting from behind, shooting from the side, it still counts as frontal armor.
Nice.
So they are I'd say they're incredibly reliable in the sense that they always have a 50-50 chance of hitting what they're shooting at, irregardless of pins. And if you've got 4 blokes, you can kind of just nuke a tank.
Yeah, you're definitely going to get that hit then. The point I wanted to raise earlier that you sort of swept past briefly, but that I often see misplayed, is when you do a recce, at the end of your recce move, even though you did a run, let's say, or an advance, you mark your dice as down, which, yes, you might have recce'd away from the first dog, but that does make you susceptible to the second dog because you've got a down order next to you. And so actually that specific rule is one you've got to really be careful with if you're trying to recce against the Soviets, because by doing it, you've let them use their dogs against you.
If you run them in pairs, like I tend to do, and if you've got nothing else that can really deal with the armor, or you need a force of recce, then it's nice to force a recce with one, activate your next unit, and bomb it.
Brilliant. Was there anything else in the anti-tank slot you want to talk about? We talked about anti-tank rifles, which are also available in the Brits episode. So it's basically the same as the Brits version, I believe. Was there anything else in the section that you want to talk about?
There's one which I take both when I'm playing thematically and competitively. I've not really seen it too much elsewhere. I've seen variants of people using it, but not. I have a very specific setup I like to use, and that is the Tank Hunters anti-tank team. So it's again, there's a NCO and men, so it's not a team in the traditional sense. It won't be removed of exceptional damage or anything like that. So starts off as 2 men. You can add up to additional 2 men for 10, 14, or 18 points respectively. And their special rules are they can forward deploy. You have the extra selection because it's the Soviet anti-tank team, and you have the tough tank hunter trait, which means when they're assaulting a vehicle, they can do 2 attacks instead of 1 per man. But what I like about them is to take 2 veterans, both with SMGs and 1 with a Panzerfaust, and they go and they hunt snipers, they hide in ruins, and they just keep vehicles away. For 47 points, they're so annoying to shift. You stick them down in terrain, you're usually hitting them on 7s. They are a fantastic cost-effective unit. They can forward deploy. I love them. I don't leave home without them.
Yeah, you use them a bit like the way we were talking about using the Piat, where you put them in the middle just to keep the tanks back more than to actually go tank hunting per se.
As far as I'm concerned, they feel the same. It's basically a forward deploying Piat, because with the range of the Panzerfaust compared to the range of the Piat, they're both 12 inches. This one's 49 points, Piat's 52 if we're talking veterans, and this is with SMGs as well. If you miss with your Piat, chances are it probably won't get another chance because it's so close to whatever it's shooting at. I think they're fantastic. They Brilliant.
Fantastic. Shall we move on to artillery?
Yes.
Yes. Now, there's one that I specifically want to ask you about because I think this is one that has a bit of a difference of opinion about it, but I know it's one that you're liking a lot of them in it, and that was the M30, the heavy rocket launcher, because some people aren't liking it, but I know you are liking it. So do you want to tell us about that one and why you're enjoying it so much at the minute?
Right. So the M30 heavy rocket launcher is, as it says on the tin, a rocket launcher. But instead of the traditional 3-inch template, it has a 4-inch template, same as a heavy howitzer.
That's good.
But between firing turns, it must take a rally order to then reload its payload to be able to fire again. So it will fire, choose its target, do what it's got to do. It will then give itself D3 pins, and then next turn it has to reload. It's one of the rare instances that I would take a multi-rocket launcher regular, and that's because it has access to a spotter, which makes it so much more survivable. because I find a lot of the inexperienced naval workers, inexperienced land mattresses, when they're allowed to be taken, they will plonk their naval or their land mattress in a ruin, or somewhere where it can see but it's got better cover, or try and make it survive. And all you got to do is plonk your mortar opposite it, and then you're trading shots. And the mortar 9 out of 10 times wins that duel. So just being able to have a spotter, you can give it line of sight if you want, put it somewhere where you can still move it, because it is still a movable unit. It's not like a heavy howitzer where you can't move it without a tow. I think it's fantastic. It's if you hit something that 4-inch template, it tends to just melt.
Yeah, I mean, for me, so the reason I'm not a big fan of it is I find that the 3-inch template tends to be enough for most of the targets that I target with artillery, and I find that the 4-inch template, if it's like a howitzer, you're paying big points for that upgrade. And so I don't find much of a difference between the two. I think the 2-inch to 3-inch is a big step up in terms of damage, but 3 to 4, I'm never. Yes, it's bigger, but I'm never that keen. But the thing for me that really makes me not like it is you're only getting 3 shots a turn. 3 shots a game, because every other turn you're reloading. And if it's one where you've had to reserve it because the mission mandates your entire army starts in reserve, and then it doesn't come on turn 1, and then maybe it doesn't come on turn 2, you're getting even less shots. And so for me, it's not. And also, I have failed rally orders on regulars before, and then you get less shots. So that's the reason for me. I mean, I do really appreciate that it's got a spotter, but there's something about having a unit that can't activate a turn that doesn't sit with me quite right, I think.
So the Soviet solution to that is take 2 of them. And
quantity has a quality of its own.
No, I'm quite enjoying them at the moment. It's if they do survive the initial blast, that D6 pins does tend to finish them off for the morale check. It's nice to see the smile drain from the opponent's face. It's like, oh, that's a heavy.
As I can testify, to be fair, having played Mike recently, and he dropped one on top of my Gurkhas and was like, "No, I'm not going down." Oh, yeah, probably should have gone down. Yeah, that 8-man squad has now got a single NCO on his own. Going, where's the rest of my unit, guys?
I would like to blame Luke Salter from the England A team. He's the one that pointed them out, and since then, fantastic.
I was going to mention that because pre-WTC, I hadn't seen you play them. Since WTC, all the time.
No, I'm enjoying them. I do like a lucky shot. I've been known for a cheeky 6 now and then, and that just sums it up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and just for admin purposes, for anyone who has been sold on the M30, it is in the Ostfront book, and it is a generic unit, so you can include it in all your generic platoons. Just pick up the Ostfront book, and you're good to go.
However, if you don't want to use the M30, I won't say second best, my joint first best is the ZIS 3 divisional gun. I took 2 of these to WTC because they allowed tank platoons this year, and it put in a shift. So essentially, at regular, it's 80 points, veteran 96 points. Inexperienced is listed in the book as 54 points, but it's 64 points from the FAQ. But it's a medium anti-tank gun, and it has a light howitzer profile, which is really cost efficient, because if it was a light howitzer with a medium anti-tank gun profile, I think it skews the points differently. I'm not too sure. We'll get to the tank slot in a second. But so it's got a gun shield, it's a team weapon, it's fixed, four crew members, it's versatile, and unlike other ones, which I believe there's one in the British book and there is another one in this book, which is a heavy anti-tank gun and medium howitzer, it doesn't have to suffer any pins from firing, or doesn't have to suffer a hit modifier from firing. And I found that medium anti-tank gun with the possibility of just lobbing a shot, fantastic. I am a big fan of ZIS 3.
Yeah, it's that being able to indirect and use it like a mortar to attack someone's multi-launcher, like you said before. That's its real strength, isn't it?
And it's 4 men as well, rather than 3, as you can see. So you've got that extra body to survive any mortar shots ranging in, and you can move it as well because it's a medium anti-tank. It's not heavy or super heavy, so you can just get up and run if you do start finding you're getting ranged in on.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic unit. I highly recommend, and it's a very iconic unit as well.
Yeah.
So if you want to go for that nice themey army, Yizis 3 is an auto include. I love it.
Yeah, and you're only paying 5 points for the upgrade as well. Compared to the Ziz 2, where you're paying 75 points, you're getting 3 men, and on your Ziz 2, it's a medium anti-tank gun with a 1-inch template. You pay 5 points more, you get an extra man and an extra inch. So that's a win-win. Brilliant. Shall we move on to armoured cars then, sir?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So, what should I be looking out for when I'm facing Soviets?
As far as I'm concerned, there's only 2 armoured cars that I'm really that fussed about.
Nice, yeah.
So this one will be a short one. I'll start in numerical order. The BA-10 is a 7+ armoured car, wheeled vehicle. It has a recce. It has a turret-mounted light anti-tank gun with coaxial LMG and a forward-facing LMG. So it's 120 points regular. That's how I tend to run it. I find it's a really good Stuart killer or another 8+. That light anti-tank, it puts in a shift. The opportunity to recce is quite nice. And then the 8 LMG shots, it's putting out the same amount of shots as a Bren carrier at capacity. It's a nice little unit. I am a big fan of them.
Yeah.
I think for what it does, it's economic.
Yeah, and because it's wheeled as well, you can go 24, can't you? So what you could do, if you really want to play aggressively, is if someone's pushed their Stuart up, you could just go 24 inches with your last dice, park yourself 6 inches from their Stuart, and then next turn, if you get first dice, that's a point-blank shot on it. And if you don't, you can just wreck you away from the Stuart shooting at you.
Also, if you're going down the competitive route, and it's a bit hit and miss competitive, not everyone wants to spend points on it, but if you're looking for a Stuart killer, being able to get that reliable side shot from your first turn run, and then having the -2 modifier from the side shot, or +2 or whatever, it is fantastic. It's really good at popping Stuarts open from the side.
Yeah, because if you are point blank on the side, you're going to be 2s to hit, and then strength 4 versus armor 6 on the side for a Stuart, 2s to glance. Yeah, you're putting that Stuart out the turn most of the time, aren't you? What was the other armoured car that you were looking at?
So the other armoured car is the BA-20. So again, a bit like the BA-10, it's a 7+ armoured car, wheeled vehicle, as a turret-mounted LMG with a 360-degree arc, and it's 65 points regular.
Nice.
It also has recce. So as it comes, it's kind of underwhelming. Nothing really special about it. But if you pay 45 points, you can replace that LMG with a flamethrower.
Ooh, now you're speaking my language.
And it is a vehicle flamethrower. I've used this to mixed success, as Phil knows from the weekend. But it's Alex Bundock who pointed me in the direction of the BA-20, and Jason from Employment who also uses it, and they've had good success with it. It's a nice reach out and touchy unit, but will also recce if you get too close. It's fantastic. It's very sticky to deal with. You have to designate assets to really pin it down. So I'm a big fan in practice, but I can't seem to get it off.
Yeah,
you just got to hope that you don't run out of fuel.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, even if you do, you can use it as a little wall, a little wreckable wall. I really like that because, again, you could use it the exact same way you did the other one, where you race it up at the end of turn 1, and then if you don't get first dice, you recce. If you do, you've ruined someone's day potentially.
It's quite nice against those infantry-heavy armies that can't really deal with your fast-moving vehicles. So if you get right in the face of a load of infantry, and you can sort of position it in a way where the infantry is between you and an AT asset, so it can't shoot through its own infantry, That's what I've been doing a bit, just trying to get it in front of a big blob of riflemen so it can't then be shot at by their AT assets and then torch them and scoot. And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan in practice.
I'd be tempted to try it the way Phil was talking about flamethrower teams, where you could put it behind the objective that you don't want them to come on, and then because you're behind the objective, they're not going to go and stand on it unless they've dealt with you first, but you're hard to deal with because you've got the recce. And I can imagine that being really powerful at stopping people getting on your objectives.
Yeah, it's also quite cool because when it runs out of fuel, you can still contest an objective. You just got to park it. And I've had games where people have kind of just ignored it because it's run out of fuel, but it's like near enough an objective where it's still contesting.
Yeah.
And they focus on other things and,
just ignore it, yeah.
It's a rookie mistake sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah. Well, moving on from the armoured cars then, into the tank section, I'd like to jump in at this point because there is one that I am incredibly jealous of, because I don't think any of the armies have access to this in the generic, but the Katusha is one of my absolute favourite units. So cheap, 64 points and experienced. It's wheeled, so you can just roll on the table in first wave and start shooting those rockets straight. And just, it's brilliant for that first wave, stopping your opponent sort of castling up. Because if they know your Katusha's rolling on late in the turn, they've got to spread right out. And the thing that just makes it so amazing is just, it's so cheap. 64 points for inexperienced. It's one of my favourite units in the whole game, and I'm always incredibly jealous that I don't really have access to it.
I would say, going back to saying it's one of those incredible units, obviously we're joking about the unarmed men and all that. The Russians, as a faction, they get everything. They are probably one of the most well looked after factions in the game. And a lot of their additional units are also generic as well. A lot of these other armies, they suffer from the issue of all these fantastic additional units, but you can't use them. Whereas I don't know whether it's the order the books came out or whatever, but the Soviets always seem to get everything they want, and it's generic and it's cheap. But I agree with what you say about Katusha. It's another one I took to the WTC. I took the Stalingrad selector, so I only had the option for one tank. I figured if I take one Stuart, I'll probably get bullied by the armored platoons. So Katusha, 64 points. If it dies, it dies.
Oh yeah,
it's expendable. It's an expendable asset.
Yeah, and it's perfect for a bit like what you're saying with the Shirkas earlier, where if you're putting loads of stuff into a Katusha, then that's such a small part of your army that actually you haven't focused on the stuff that is moving up the board to do the important stuff. And so it is a big, what they used to call distraction con effects in 40k, where you just plonk it down. It's like, you've got to deal with it.
The thing with the Russians, specifically the Russians, I find is their units are so cheap. So they say, you got to deal with a Katusha or deal with the dogs or deal with a Straff or whatever. But the cost you're paying for the unit compared to what they do, fantastic. 26 points for 2 dogs, and that is 2 +5 damage modifiers against armored vehicles. Well, against vehicles. That is such good value for money. But so that's a bit of a tangent.
So what else should I be looking at in the tank section then?
If you're anything like me, I enjoy a fun tank. I quite like the land battleships. So you got a T-28 medium tank, which I will take in my competitive lists. It's probably not the most optimized unit, but it's got a decent amount of shots. So it's one of those long early war tanks. It's got a turret-mounted light howitzer with a coaxial MMG, a rear-facing MMG, the potential to pay for a pintle-mounted MMG, and then it has 2 more separate turret-mounted MMGs. So that's 3 turrets and 5 MMGs if you want to go all out. It's fantastic. 155 points at the basic. If you're going to pay for the pintle mounted, I believe that's an extra 15 points. That's something added in the FAQ. But yeah, it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
But if it isn't big enough for you, then we have the T-35 heavy tank, which it's an absolute mammoth. I believe, other than the French Char 2C, it's the second biggest tank in the game. So it's 270 points. It's a 9+ medium tank, and its weapons are one turret-mounted light howitzer with coaxial MMG, one turret-mounted MMG covering the front and left arcs, one turret-mounted MMG covering the rear and right arcs, one turret-mounted light anti-tank gun with coaxial MMG covering the front and right arcs, one turret-mounted light anti-tank gun with coaxial MMG covering the left and rear arcs. It's got everything a growing lad needs.
5 turrets. Did I count that right? 5 turrets?
Yeah.
It is. If you're one of those sadists who do play Turret Jam, get yourself a D20 and then divide it by 4, and that's how you work out which turret jams. It does have the unreliable rule, unfortunately, which means for every pin mark it receives, it does receive another pin marker. However, no one ever wants to shoot it because it's so cool. So why would they?
It's one of those tanks that is never going to clear that 2-inch bubble when you're trying to clear the ranging in from indirect fire. Because it's so big, isn't it?
It is.
It's one of those tanks that struggles to advance onto the table in first wave.
There is that as well, yeah.
Luckily for it, it's not slow.
I was just checking that.
So it does get to launch itself a bit, should it need to.
Yeah.
I would like to give another honourable shout out to the IS-2.
Yeah.
My favourite Russian tanks aren't necessarily competitive ones. You don't need me to tell you, a Stuart's good, a Katusha's good. We know what the good ones are. But the IS-2, so it's a heavy tank. It's got that 10+ armour. Turret-mounted heavy anti-tank gun with coaxial MMG, one turret-mounted rear MMG, and one forward-facing hull-mounted MMG. So quite a very standard setup. Can get a pintle-mounted HMG for 25 points, but I'm not really a fan. So for the basic, it's 320 points regular. So it's a bit of an investment. But instead of a HE2 that the normal heavy anti-tank gun has, it has a HE3.
Nice.
And I find for the cost of what it does compared to, say, something like a Tiger, so the Tiger does have the super heavy anti-tank gun, but I find a +6 is enough, both in range and penetration value. But that HE3 is delicious. It's 320 points. If you want to run a heavy tank for a bit of fun, the IS-2 is a great one. And it looks cool. It's a good looking tank.
Yeah. It's slow loading though, isn't it? So you can't...
It is slow load.
It can't be the first unit you order in the turn. Is that right?
No, unless you use your officer and snap to.
Yeah.
So your officer lives in his exhaust and whispers little nothings into the driver's ear.
Yeah, he just follows the tank behind and just prays that it doesn't get wrecked, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I see your IS-2, and I'd like to raise you an IS-3 because I think I might be wrong here because I can't remember what the mouse's armor value is, but the IS-3's front armor is a 12. And I don't think the mouse might match that, but nothing else in the game is going to match that because a 12 is just absurd. Even your Fausts are looking for 5s and 6s, aren't they?
No. Your Fausts are looking for 6s at a glance.
Yeah, crazy.
I'm laughing because it's 600 points regular.
Spoilers.
So a vehicle like that with 600 points regular, ideally you want to take it to an event like the English Open, which has a 1,500 point tank platoon event.
Yeah.
That's
where you'll probably see one.
Oh yeah,
that's where you will see one. Wink, wink.
Oh, I'd love to see one. Yeah, because I mean, yes, it's 600 points, but actually at 1,500, as you say, that still leaves you 900 points to play with. I mean, you could still fit 4 Katyushas and all the other Soviet toys in for 900 points, couldn't you?
Well, it's where you get your T-26s in. You're a little 70-point double MMG. They're the cutest little tanks. I think they're fantastic. But no, yeah, it's if you want to use a 600-point tank, use that one.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. If you want to spend more than half your points on one tank, take that one. Take it veteran. Only 720.
Can you take the Tachanka as a option in a tank platoon, for example? So the
Yes.
Tachanka is the rear-facing soft skin MMG on the back of a cart.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can take an IS-3, sorry, and then just surround it with some rear-facing horse-drawn MMGs.
That is another unit that's absolutely brilliant. I used to see it all the time. I remember a few years ago, every Soviet army used to have a truck with 4 machine guns on the back, and it used to just wreck anything that it caught off guard.
So that's the Tokarev, isn't it?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
That's
Which
the
one's the
quad Maxim.
Tachanka?
The Tachanka is literally a bloke with an MMG sat on the back of a cart. It's a horse-drawn limber with an MMG on the back of it, and it costs 20 points.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I'd pay the 60 points to upgrade it to the Tokarev then.
Yeah, I was going for the contrast between the IS-3 and that. But no, the Tokarev is worth talking about, isn't it? The quad MMG.
Yeah.
Turret mounted, yeah.
Yeah, 4 MMGs. So what's that? 20 shots. Puts the Stuart to shame, that does.
60 points, yeah.
60 points. Absolutely insane. I mean, the problem with that in terms of tank platoons is, yes, you've taken for 240 points, you've got 80 machine gun shots in a turn. But if you're playing tank wars, that's not going to be hugely helpful against Stuarts. Right, the other one in the tank slot that I wanted to talk about, which has completely escaped me, was the KV-1. Well, that whole family of tanks, because I faced. Is there a KV-2 that's got like a fridge on the roof? Basically, what's that one?
Yeah, so the KV-2 is the 10 plus heavy. Well, it's a self-propelled artillery piece, but 10 plus. As a turret-mounted heavy howitzer with coaxial MMG, one turret-mounted rear MMG, and one forward-facing hull MMG, as you come to expect. So at its base, it's 300 points for that big heavy tank, heavy howitzer chassis, which is great fun. However, some KV-2s can have the flamethrower in the turret, so you can replace the coaxial machine gun with a flamethrower should you choose to. So if you're not sure whether you want to howitzer that unit within 6 inches or flamethrower that unit within 6 inches, you now have options.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit frustrating that you can't do both. So it's a shame they didn't put it in the hull historically. But yeah, the other thing as well with that flamethrower is, if you're getting to use it, the enemy's probably done something wrong, because
you shouldn't be that close.
You're a big slow tank so you've been spotted on the horizon, you're advancing incredibly slowly. Really, you should be quite an easy one to avoid. But I just love it because it's so ludicrously large. The turret that they had to put on it to fit that big gun in it's like the same height as the rest of the tank.
I would like to give a shout out to Warlord Games here for their KV-1/KV-2 kit. It comes with both turret options.
Oh, that's nice.
Not all the kits do. I think it was a nice touch. It's the same hull and chassis for both tanks. So yeah, I thought it was a nice touch. And it's a nice kit to build as well, actually.
That's really nice, actually, yeah, because that's one of the things Rubicon gets praised for. And I've praised them before to people, where they give you the tank and they give you all the parts to make the different variants depending on how you want to build it. And so that's really nice to hear that there's Warlord kits where that's available. So great shout out there, Mike.
Well, you can use both. You know, sometimes you get a kit where you can make one of multiple variants. This one, you can make both variants. You get both tanks for the price of one.
Yeah, that's like what I do with my...
Fantastic.
Yeah, I do that with my Shermans, where the 105, I've got a 105 turret that I swap in, basically, so I don't have to have two hulls and 2 turrets. I've just got 1 hull, and I just swap in depending on what I fancy playing that week. Is there anything else in the tank slot either of you wanted to highlight before we move on to the best part of the selector?
I have one, which is the OT-34. So this is 235 points regular, It's 9 plus damage value, and it's one turret-mounted medium anti-tank gun with a coaxial MMG and a forward-facing hull-mounted flamethrower.
Nice.
So it's obviously cheaper than what we were talking about earlier. What was that? The
KV1, I believe. Yeah. Oh, KV2. Sorry, had the
KV2. Yeah. That's the one, the fridge. Yeah, the one with the tank and fridge on the top. Yeah. So it's cheaper than that, and it's in the hull. But obviously, it's only an anti-tank gun rather than a howitzer in the turret.
But it's still brilliant because it means you've got at range, you've got the anti-tank gun, and point blank, you got the flamethrower, which is one of the things we said about the Stuarts. The variant that we don't see but we quite liked was the one where you put the flamethrower in the hull.
In the hull,
so you can go infantry hunting and tank hunting depending on what day it is.
Mm-hmm.
Anything from you, Mike, before we move on to transports?
Not really. Like I said earlier, if you have any sort of tank you can imagine, just pick your favorite armor value, pick your weapon of choice, and then pick as many machine guns as you want. The Russians probably do it, in some way or another.
Because much like the British, they got the Lend-Lease, and so as we said in that episode, other tanks are available. See a future episode when we talk about American tanks. Brilliant. So transports. Now they do get the Bren carrier, so we all love it. I assume you love it as well, Mike?
I do. I took it to WTC. So the Bren carrier, well, the universal carrier is an additional unit added in the Budapest selector, in the Budapest book. So it is a generic unit, and it can be used in a lot of the theatre selectors, I think from 44 onwards. So they've hard unlocked it that way. However, in the Armies of the Soviet Union book, the Lend-Lease doesn't work the same as the Brits. So it isn't a specific selection where you pick your tank, pay your points, and that's that. It's a like-for-like swap. So in theatre selectors, where, for example, you can take a T-34, you instead swap it for the earliest version of the Sherman. Or if you have a KV-1, I believe, or IS-1, you can swap it for a Churchill, and that's how you unlock the Stuart in a lot of these selectors. I forget which one it is. I believe it's the T60 that you can swap for the M3 Stuart. So you can swap the T20 Consummates for the Bren gun carrier, and because it's classed as coming from another Army's book, you can put Vengeance on it, which is
nice.
It's fun just to say, mine's got Vengeance as well. But like I say, with the Bren gun carrier and the mounted recce, they were made for each other.
On the Bren carrier, now the one that I've used with my Finns, which I love, is the Komsomolets. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Probably wrong because it's Russian. But that one is basically a Bren. It's tracked, it's armor 7, open topped, and it's the same points as well with a forward facing LMG. But it has one extra seat. So for the same points as a Bren, you're getting 6 men transport capacity rather than 5. So actually, that one would be a good one to pair with your 5 engineers and an officer, which will nicely boost you in the outflank.
On the outflank, yeah.
One of the things the Bren carrier and the Indian pattern car for the Brits lacks is the ability to boost it by putting an officer inside. So I really like that one. Any other transports we should be aware of, Mike?
Not particularly. They get the basic truck. They get a truck with a half track so it can go through dodgy terrain. It gets the Jeep for your typical flamethrower in a Jeep. Back to the Bren carrier. If you take the universal carrier from the Budapest book, you can put a HMG on the pintle. I've seen some people use it to varying success. Not something I personally do, but it's there if you want to. Yeah.
The big problem I have with the HMG is they've made it a 25-point upgrade. It basically makes the unit uncompetitive because you're only getting 3 shots. You've paid 25 points to the privilege. It's not great. I think if it was the same cost as a machine gun, so your choice was, do you want 5 shots with no pin or with no pen, or 3 shots with a pen value? I think that's an interesting decision to have to make. Do I want the extra shots with no pen or pen with less shots? But at 25 points, it's just too much to put on something like a universal carrier, I think. So that's transports covered. Is there anything else we've missed, Mike? Was there anything any absolute howlers, people will be screaming into their wireless sets saying, oh, I can't believe you didn't cover this one.
Oh, to be honest, I could probably talk for about 5 hours straight on all the unique units that the Russians get. They are, alongside the Brits, probably one of the most looked after armies in bolt action. They have a tool for every slot and they can take it twice. So
on that note, so the view in the community is that because of that reason, the Brits and the Soviets are the two most competitive armies in the game at the moment. But what we've seen recently is the Soviets haven't performed as well as the Brits. Even though they get the same Stuarts, they've got loads of different infantry choices. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the Brits are doing better than the Soviets at the minute?
I would say, as a Soviet player, and speaking on behalf of all Soviet players, we're just crap. It's to do with the player. I don't know, to be honest. I think maybe when you think of a really hardcore competitive list, not necessarily from any specific nation, if I said, give me your hardcore competitive list, you think Gurkha paratroopers and Stuarts.
Yeah.
I just think the British ability to be able to ignore pins with up and atom paired with Gurkhas is quite tasty. I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that one.
No.
I think, again, it depends on the player as well. Because in our local scene, obviously, if you're in a different country, different scene, your mileage may vary. There are some really good British players that play British armies in our scene.
Yeah. And I do wonder if that's part of it, because I've thought about this, and I do wonder if, much like we said with the Stuart, what's happening is the good players are taking Stuarts because that's what they see as a good unit, which means, of course, they do well with it, which means that other people see it, so the other good players also take Stuarts. And I do wonder if that's what's happening as well, where the good players are taking Brits because Brits do well, which means that Brits do well because the good players are taking them.
It's a bit of a self-perpetuating cycle, isn't it?
It might just be, now this is my own opinions, so it might be, there might have been a bit of a turn away from the Soviets just with current affairs. I know some people have expressed the discontent for playing with them. They said, they put them on the shelf, they don't really want to use them, which is fair enough. People have taken their own opinions. But the English Nationals last year, which was a very competitive tournament, the top 6 standing went British, Soviet, British, Soviet, British, Soviet. So I think the Soviet, if we're not as good as the Brits, we're definitely on the heels. They're I think they're as good as the Brits. Just need someone good to use them.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll find out at future WTCs, and we'll prove that point.
From my perspective, I don't play Soviets. I've never played Soviets. And I did say in an earlier episode, if I was going to jump into bolt action knowing what I know now, I possibly would choose to play Soviets purely because, as Mike said earlier, they are a bit of a subway, selection in that you can pretty much just slice and dice them in any different way. And I know, people say the Brits don't need, like the land mattress because they've got everything else and so on. But the Soviets literally have everything you can think of in terms of possible permutations of infantry squads. I love the fact you can take, up to 3 anti-tank units in that slot, particularly when you've got such variety in terms of the tank hunters or the anti-tank rifles or the dogs. Every possible combination and permutation of vehicle in the tank slot. So I just wondered if there's an element, Mike, where there are so many different options that it actually can be too much. And if you look at, and we'll talk about the US in a future episode, and Johnny obviously is a very experienced US player. You look at something like the US or the Japanese, where you don't actually have that many options. You look at the Soviets, and there's just so many. And is it almost a case of, I just don't know where to go with this? And obviously, the very best players will have worked it out because they'll try combinations and they'll try things that synergize well. Whereas people starting Soviets or maybe middling experienced Soviet players may still be finding their feet because there's just too much to choose from.
I think there's probably an element of that. But if you're getting into the Soviets, especially the way I play, I do like the hordes. I like high dice and I like cheap units, which does mean there's almost nowhere to cut any fat without just gutting a unit.
Mhm.
So if I'm I don't know, say 8 points over my platoon limit, so I've got 1,008 points out of 1,000. Well, I've got to cut something in.
Yeah.
My units are like, you'll look at a 26-point dog unit and you think, wow, that's a cheap unit to cut. But because of the effect that 26-point unit has on the game, you don't want to cut it.
Yeah.
And if you're running these horde armies, chances are you haven't really got SMGs, or you've minimized the Panzerfaust you're using. If you're running a veteran army, I've played a few veteran armies just for a bit of fun. If you stick body armor on them and you go over your points, you go, let's take the body armor off and then swap it for a couple of SMGs. And I think most of it's just working out what works well with what.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's trial and error, experimentation. I mean, they're a fun army as well. Like, I know we've been talking a lot competitively, especially with our unit choices, but because of the options they've got, you can have some real fun playing with some silly armies.
I don't enjoy playing against them for that reason. And it's mainly because I'm like, right, what's going on? Which unit's doing what? What have we got here today? Whereas, with other nations, it's like, yeah, I know what that one does. Yeah, I know what that one does. That's fine. And I'm like, certainly when I've played you, Mike, or if I'm playing Joe at the club and stuff, it's like, right, what weird combo or what weird unit am I facing today?
Brilliant. Well, there's nothing further from me. Anything further from you guys?
No, nothing further from me.
Nothing further from me.
Fantastic. So the last thing I just want to say is thank you so much for coming on, Mike. It's been very interesting as well as informative talking through the Soviet list. It's not one that I get to face often enough to really have a good understanding of it. So having someone going through the units they think are fun and strong is incredibly useful. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Mike.
Thank you for having me. And obviously, all wrong opinions are my own. But no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, lads.
Oh, thank you, Mike. And hopefully we'll see you back on another episode in the not too distant future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then finally, thank you to anyone listening. Thank you for everyone tuning in regularly, week by week. We are really enjoying making the podcast and interacting with people. Obviously, it's our favourite hobby, so we do enjoy it, talking about it every week. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Please like, share, subscribe, and do everything that you should be doing with podcasts. And it is ta-ta for now from me.
And ta-ta for now from me. Ta-ta.
Ta-ta.